Welcome to Backpack Everywhere. My name is Colin, and today I'm going to share with you my top tips for traveling solo. Traveling solo is a really interesting way to travel. It forces you to get out of your comfort zone and just be completely dependent on yourself for literally everything. I remember that the first day of my 3-month trip to Europe was probably the hardest. I was just really excited, and there was just a sense of fear too, just being in a new country. And I think all of this was heightened by the fact that I didn't have a clear plan for the first few days of my trip. I really just knew the city I wanted to be in, and I had a couple of hostels in mind that I would like to stay at. And that was pretty much it. I could have made the start of my trip a lot easier on myself just by over planning for the first few days and maybe even the first couple of weeks. And by over plan, I mean just finding specific activities that you want to do in each place that make you excited, and having your accommodation clearly laid out, knowing exactly where you need to be each night. I think this would have just really eased me into the experience a bit better. When you're traveling on your own, there are gonna probably be hours and hours where you're by yourself and you may not have anyone to talk to. You won't be able to talk on the phone because you probably won't have service. You know, even the people around me on trains were usually talking in a different language. And so I couldn't even occupy my mind by listening to what they were talking about. So like I said, it's totally normal to feel lonely sometimes. I think that time is some of the best time just to reflect on life, you know, why you're taking this trip, what you want out of it, and just, you know, the type of person that you want to be. While you might experience some loneliness, you'll definitely connect with other people if you're intentional about it. My favorite ways to do this were to stay at hostels that usually drew in like a younger crowd of people. Another great way I connected with people was on free walking tours, or just engaging in any of like the free activities that hostels might be putting on for their guests. If you can find it within yourself just to strike up a conversation, I've found that it's really worth it in the long run, because you could have a new best friend to explore a city with for the day. When you're traveling solo, it's easy to become overly focused just on all of your personal needs. And so I know a concern for me was just making sure I had enough money to last the full 3 months of my trip. I came to the end of my trip and I had a ton of extra money left over because I think I was a little bit overly stingy with my money. If I could go back, I think I would just like to be more generous. I think there were opportunities where I could have just been a blessing to people and maybe bought them a meal or bought them a drink or paid their admission into an activity. I know that if someone did that for me, then that could, you know, really turn my day around if I was having a bad day. Just keep that in mind as you're traveling. Look for opportunities just to show love to other people and use your travel time as a way to be an encouragement and a blessing to other people. Traveling solo is the perfect opportunity to push your own boundaries and get out of your shell. So if you're normally an introvert, pushing your boundaries means really going out of your way to be more social than you usually are. If you're an extrovert and you're naturally just a people person and you're used to always being around people, I think travel is a good time just to take a step back and really, you know, reflect more and maybe just get comfortable just being on your own. Whatever the opposite of normal is for you, I think that travel is just the perfect time to explore that and just to develop yourself more as a person. Another tip I have is to splurge when you need to. Now this goes kind of hand in hand with my tip about being generous. You also want to be generous with yourself, and keep in mind that you're gonna have opportunities on this trip that you might not ever have at any other point in your life. My wife and I recently traveled to Machu Picchu. For whatever reason, we decided not to get a guided tour and just go and explore it on our own. You know, we still had a good time, but I think learning more about the history and just paying a little extra and getting that guided tour would have really heightened the experience for us. If there's something that you think you should do or that you want to do, sometimes it is worth it just to pay a little extra, just so you can get that experience that you may never be able to have again. A lot of times traveling is associated with partying. Maybe you're in a city that you've never been to before and you're drunk and it's late at night and you can't find your hostel. That's just a really dangerous situation that people could easily take advantage of. When I was traveling, I always tried to arrive at places during the day as opposed to late at night, just because you don't always know an area and where the bad parts of town might be. You also just want to be careful about, you know, not being careless with your belongings. I remember about the middle of my 3-month trip, I started just to get a little bit more relaxed and not as careful. And I had this bag full of food that I kept with me to eat on trains. One day I was sitting on a bench and I got up to get on my train and I never picked up that bag of food. And so I was very hungry that day, needless to say. Because of that, I developed a new habit of every time I stood up from somewhere, I would turn back and just make sure that I picked up everything that was with me. Your backpack when you're traveling solo is like your lifeblood. And if you lose all that stuff, it'll be a serious pain to rebuild that kit on the go. I think another good tip for not being reckless is just to communicate with someone back home. Let them know what you're doing. Connect to Wi-Fi, send someone a quick text or email. You know, heaven forbid anything ever happened to you, then they have a starting point to know where you were last and where they should start looking for you. My next tip is to learn the local language. When I say learning the language, I don't mean you have to become fluent in it before your trip, but maybe just downloading an app and spending a few minutes each day just brushing up on some words. Depending on where you're going, you know, people might be great at speaking English, but I've traveled places where, you know, it really was a struggle communicating, and thankfully there were people around me who could interpret and communicate for me. You just never really want to count on that 100% because you never know if other people will be around. Another quick tip for traveling solo, I'm sure you've heard this before, but I think it's repeated a lot for a reason, and it is to pack lightly. This just makes it easier to keep track of everything that you have with you. It also makes you look less like a tourist, which sometimes can pinpoint you as a target for people that might want to pickpocket you. If you're concerned about packing lightly and you think that might be hard for you, I think a good idea would be to just pack up your backpack like you're gonna pack it for your trip, and maybe try living out of that backpack for like a week or so and just see if you can do it. If you can't, then you'll likely identify maybe some items you forgot about and that you'd like to bring. And you might also just figure out stuff that you don't need to bring with you and that you probably won't use as much. Also, just depending on how you're traveling, there may be, you know, luggage size requirements. Going smaller usually means you can avoid some extra fees and make your trip just a little bit more cheaper for you. Another tip I would give is don't be afraid to document your adventure. I highly encourage that you do so. You know, keep a journal, take pictures, take videos, do something every day just to remind yourself of what you did for that day. While there is something to be said for not, you know, living your whole trip through the lens of a camera, the human brain isn't great at remembering details, and you'll inevitably forget a lot of the stuff that you do and see on your trip. So if there's something that you really appreciate, document it one way or another. What I plan on doing the next time I do a big trip, I just want to do like a journal entry every day, and then maybe like a picture of the day to go with the entry. I think that would just be super cool. And then you can maybe like print it out when you're done with your trip and just have this awesome memento of your time traveling. So yeah, that's what I want to do. If you want to learn more about the trip that I took, I've got other videos on my channel that you can check out. But thanks for stopping by today and watching this. Good luck on your solo travel, and I'll see you guys next time.